Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Kagekaze, and I'd like to welcome you to my first Diablo Digest. And the reason for this is because I wanted to find a way to kind of talk about the news that has been going on with Diablo without throwing it on to one of my existing playthroughs or series or whatever. The main reason for this is the Witch Doctor series I have is kind of a niche thing. I have some of you that are very loyal to it and watch it, and I appreciate that. And you know that I do go into some pretty deeper discussion about some of the things that are happening with Diablo in that series. But I kind of realize that that's not the best way to broaden the audience and to basically bring a discussion like this to light. So I wanted to just try this out, do this Diablo Digest, and we're going to talk about news from about the last 2 weeks. And I realize that that makes this kind of old hat and not exactly news. But every time I sat down and kind of wanted to do this, something new kept getting released about Diablo. It's been a very busy, week and a half. So many new things keep coming out. And I think there's lots of material here. So what I want to do is first thank the fine gentlemen at Diablo Fans, because without them I wouldn't really have near as many of these things to talk about. I love the fact that they have very good reporting and they're very prompt on it, unlike me. So what we're going to go ahead and do, we're going to go back to about the 28th of February, and we're going to look at some of the things they've been talking about. And the first thing that I have here on the list of stories is the buff bar and auction house tooltips. And the auction house tooltips, well, we know they're planning that. They're going to fix that. So I'm not going to really talk about that. But what I want to talk about is the buff bar, the 5 buffs that we get at the bottom of the screen in Diablo. And for some reason, they will not give us a way to see all our buffs. And I've always disliked that, because when I went and I actually tried that Barbarian Whirlwind Tornado build, and I kind of enjoyed it, but one thing I noticed was with certain buffs, it was kind of hard to tell when a buff was going to fall off, and it made it harder to manage my rage unless I could think in my head how long it had been since I last used Sprint or something like that. So what Blizzard says is, we think that it would be great to be able to view more than 5 of your active buffs, and we're looking into solutions that would ensure players are able to view buffs that are important to them, while also keeping UI clutter to a minimum. Ideally, we'd like to avoid situations where a portion of your screen is overwhelmed by buff icons, for example, just having your buffs stack across the bottom of your bar, and we're still experimenting with different ways to present that information in a format that works well for Diablo 3. Okay, this is well and good, but the problem is they keep looking for these solutions, and it delays it and it delays it. And I understand Blizzard's philosophy for quality. I really do, and I respect them for it, because they usually will wait until something is ready before they release it, which is why Diablo 3 got delayed for so long, even though even then it technically wasn't quite ready. But that kind of came down to the point where they're like, you know what, we got to release this at some point because we'll never release it if we keep waiting. And it just, I don't know, I guess it irks me a little bit that they could easily give us that buff solution. I mean, they basically locked down Diablo 3 in its UI because they didn't want people to bring in hacks like the map hack of Diablo 2 Yor. But I think back to my experience in World of Warcraft, and I think, I really liked having those buff icons like in the upper corner or something like that. And I liked it because it gave me at a glance if I wanted that information. Now, in that game, they also had ways of shutting some of it down, like redundant buffs or buffs that never had a drop time. Like if they were permanent because they were maybe a paladin aura or something like that, you could hide those. And only the ones with a cooldown time or countdown timer would appear. And you could even change it to where it was a variant of where a certain threshold would be reached, and then they would show up. And I really like that, because I personally like having information. I have all my damage numbers on, I have the hit points on. I love that they give me that information. I especially love that they do this in Diablo 3, and I've noticed a distinct lack of it in other ARPGs. For example, Path of Exile doesn't have that. I really wish it did, because it would help me evaluate their skills. If I could see my numbers at a glance, it would really help me determine how I feel about certain things, because I would get instant feedback on what I'm doing and how that skill is interacting with the environment. Torchlight 2 does a slightly better job of it, but it still lacks some things from what I could see. And Diablo has everything that I want at a glance. And yet, we don't have a buff bar. Really, I would just like them to implement a simple option that says, do you want to have it scrolling across the screen? Do you care? Yes or no? Give me a checkbox. I would love that, honestly, because I would like to just be able to turn that on and see everything. I don't care if Blizzard doesn't think it's elegant. It's what I want to see. It's the information that I want to help me perform in the game. So I kind of disagree with them on this philosophy, really. I mean, I do know they're trying to keep it clean, but the thing is they could add an option to let you see it all, and then work, basically make that off as a default, so that way that if you want it, it's kind of like having advanced tooltips. Give us a way to turn it on, and then have it off by default, so you can leave it uncluttered for the people that really don't want it. And that those of us that do, we just go out, we find the icons that we want. I think that would be the best way of doing it. Well, let's move on from that one, because I do have a lot to go over. That's kind of, honestly, that's my opinions on that. Here's the big one. Immediately after that, we had the giant post from Travis Day, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to be going over this. We're going to talk about it. So this will be the longest part, I believe. And I talked briefly on this in my last Witch Doctor video, and where I talked about my thoughts about the auction house and how that really wasn't the problem with the game. It was a particular problem with the trifecta or quadfecta system that exists in Diablo 3, and that you need very specific items in order to feel like you're progressing. It's not that there aren't enough items, it's not that the auction house is required, it's just that it's very hard to get a very specific set of items with a pool of random affixes that is huge. So let's look at Travis Day's post. So he talks about challenge. Challenge is certainly something that has value. Players can't feel a sense of accomplishment if everything in the game can be face rolled. I think many people would agree that at launch the game was too challenging. It was very difficult to progress without Inferno depending upon your class or items, and the challenge was a large part of the reason players felt that they were driven to the auction house in the first place. That's an interesting statement there, and I believe it true. There was a huge challenge there in the beginning, and Blizzard didn't anticipate the use of the auction house. The way it worked, the way people actually flocked to it. I mean, it was massive. The people buying and selling items. They added this system, if you can believe them and take them at face value. They added this system to combat the selling of items with real money transactions on third-party websites. See, the problem with those sites is, well, for one, that stuff is illegal because it's part of the terms of use, but those third-party websites are not trusted. They're shifty, really, in a way. Some of them could be trusted by the community, and that's great. But what if, Joe Average User doesn't know what the good sites are? He could go out and get himself scammed. Buy gold, or, well, in Diablo 2 it wasn't really gold. Stones of Jordan, I suppose. Go out and buy a bunch of this stuff, or even items, and have his money taken. And what guarantee does he have? I mean, Blizzard cannot help you with that. That's a purchase that you made on someone else's website. So this is supposed to be a way to have a safe trading environment without needing to sit there and spam trade chat all day. And they talk about that. I'll get into that a bit more later. But the thing is the auction house got massively used because of the difficulty. People wanted to get those items. And the thing is there are people out there that will push and they'll be ahead of the game. You got people like Creparian out there who prepare for this in advance, and they have everything they want. They've got a strategy in mind to build ready. They know what they're going to do, and they're out there, and they don't really need all the super gear that they're finding. In fact, they probably found something better already, and they're going to just sell it off. The high-end players will sell it off. And so other players are getting their hand-me-downs, and they're getting power much quicker than Blizzard anticipated. They thought the item grind was going to take far longer, and look what happened. The auction house said, nope. No, everybody's going to have what they want right now, which is what it was designed for. But I don't think they were anticipating just the sheer flood of items that they would get. Alright, let's go on. Travis Day continues to say, when you present players with difficult content, they will find a way to overcome it, which usually means using only the most powerful items and abilities. The unfortunate side effect is it also drives players away from the playstyles that they feel are just fun. Again, a very important statement there because I agree. And unfortunately, here's my big problem with Diablo 3 right now, and it's something I noticed when I tried to do my Barbarian build. Alright, I've put out two builds out there. One for a Engineer Demon Hunter, one for a Barbarian that doesn't use Whirlwind, right? Because I wanted to do something different, something that I thought was fun, and I did have fun with it, and I think it's still a great build. That I just go around and I love tooling around using Merciless Assault, charging through enemies. And the feedback I got on that one was odd and yet enlightening. And it showed me the major flaw with the game. It's efficiency. The major flaw with Diablo 3 is it's too damn efficient. Seriously. Diablo 3, if you want to be competitive in this game, or if you want to... The best gears, the best build, and all of that, everyone considers anything that is not efficient to be useless. And that saddens me. When I put out that build, some people were like, hey, that's great, that sounds like fun. Some people didn't like Whirlwind, so there was good feedback there. But then I saw the feedback where it's like, well, this isn't efficient. You're taking too long between monsters. This is bad. And someone made a hybrid build from the Whirlwind thing that pretty much just swapped maybe a couple of skills. It was still fairly similar to the Whirlwind thing. And I'm like, hey, that's cool. That's great. But in the end, I look at it and it's like there's still skills here that are not being replaced, like, sprint with the tornadoes or something like that. I'm like, it's almost like sprint is considered mandatory because a lot of high-end players, they just want to kill as fast as possible. So if you're sitting there and killing a group of monsters, you want to move to the next group of monsters as quickly as possible. Now, I understand that. I mean, if that's what you're into, great. But the thing that gets me is I feel like that's really driving a lot of people now. And honestly, I feel that that's really driving the decision that they're making towards monster density right now. Again, we'll talk about that as well. And I'm not sure how I feel about that, really. It's one of those things where I think people have stopped really trying to find ways to enjoy the game, and they're just really out there just to grind out items. And I wonder if that's another side effect of the auction house. And that's why I bring it up now. Is because if the items that you want need to have very specific stats, then obviously the best way to get it is to be very efficient in what you're farming, because the chance of you getting what you want is fairly low due to the high amount of random affixes that are in the game. And it really, I think it kind of sucks that it devolves into that. Now, I'm going to be honest. Act 3 is the big efficiency one. That is where the biggest density of monsters is. And I enjoy Act 3 because I like slaughtering huge groups of monsters, but every now and then I kind of like going back to the old acts. Maybe not Act 2, because, it's a desert and it's covered in bees. But I kind of like the feel of Act 1. Something about Act 1, it's kind of like in Diablo 2. That first act, for me, was always kind of the definitive Diablo. It always had that nostalgic feel, or that feeling that to me was Diablo. I loved Act 1. And I love Act 1 in this one. It's got that feeling. And it's just kind of fun to tool around in it with that. But obviously with lower density and things like that, yeah, it's definitely not very efficient when it comes to farming out items. And so again, we have this density fix that's coming, and maybe that'll make it feel better. But it's one of those things where for people that want to just have fun, it's great as is, but again, it's just this efficiency thing. It's an odd beast to tackle, I think. And it's interesting to see the way they're going to take this, and I really wonder how people are going to feel about it, because the truth of the matter is Act 3 is still probably going to be the most efficient route to take. I don't think they're going to increase density enough that it won't be. And I really think that the itemization changes they're talking about may be a good step in the right direction to try and make it more interesting and fun to play other acts. Maybe the grind of efficiency won't be as important if they can make more items be important. Alright, well, we'll move on here. Travis Day again goes on. He says, we have taken steps to improve this problem a number of ways, reducing the overall difficulty of Inferno, improving the potency of underused skills to allow players more diversity in their gameplay, and introducing monster power to allow players to set the game to a level which they feel is enjoyable. I think the right way to introduce challenge is to make it optional. For example, having difficult content for the players that enjoy it without penalizing the players who prefer a more relaxed gameplay experience. And with that, they hit it on the head. I'm going to be honest, they did. The problem with the original Inferno was that it was a wall. And people felt that they needed to progress through that in order to get what they wanted, and they were pretty much right. Because the best items would drop in the highest level of the Inferno Act. So if you are a person that wants to progress, you are going to feel bad that you can't get through Inferno. To you, that wasn't a difficulty jump, it was a progression wall. So this decision to lower the difficulty of Inferno, make it kind of balanced around that, was good, I think. And then Monster Power was the solution they needed to make it so that it could be difficult for the people that wanted a challenge. That way, if you went into Inferno, you could go into Inferno, get the items that you want at the lower levels, and then you could start bumping up the difficulty if that's what you wanted and make it harder on yourself. They also added the ability to make it a little easier to farm, but of course we find out that efficiency, again, efficiency, dictated that high levels of Monster Power were not being used nearly as much as they probably thought they would be. High efficiency requires lower levels of Monster Power unless you have amazing gear. And that is completely possible to do. But again, I mean, for me, I like Monster Power, high levels of Monster Power. I like playing the game, leveling with Monster Power 10 because I find it to be more of a challenge and less boring, really. Because leveling through the game without Monster Power wasn't really too much to it. And honestly, you couldn't test some builds because monsters would die so quickly. And so I'm kind of having fun with my Witch Doctor now that I can put things on Monster Power 10 because it really makes me think about the builds and how I'm playing my character as I level. And I found that the challenge, Monster Power was probably one of the best things they could do to help things along. Alright, moving on to the items in Auction House. Quote, items are a topic with a tremendous amount of depth and also a sensitive subject, so I'll do my best to provide some of our insight into the matter. Removing bad affixes is certainly a suggestion that surfaces from time to time. Other suggestions is to group all the good affixes into a shared category so that they can't roll all on the same item. I think on the surface those sound good, but the reality of what they would do to the itemization isn't what we want. I addressed the topic of bad affixes in a prior post about items, so I won't go into too much detail here, but I think it's well within our ability to make those affixes compelling for some people. Pickup Radius and Witch Doctors are a good example of this. Specifically, as it relates to Thorns, no one will disagree that in its current state, it's pretty lackluster, but it supports a playstyle that I'm sure we can capture with enough alterations to both the core mechanic and some supporting class abilities and passives. Okay, that's good there. So, yeah. Bad affixes. Yeah, there's... The weird thing is some of them really aren't, I guess, that bad. It's just that compared to everything else, they're not that good. I can't really say most of them are bad, although there are affixes I really don't even just look at. I mean, for example, the increased health on health globes. Now, if I were making a build around health globes, I mean, sure, that would be kind of neat, but that seems kind of niche. When they finally added the ability to help potions with health globes, I mean, or the health additional bonus there, that was definitely an improvement, but still, I would rather have other stats on my gear. If they could make other affixes better, or even just make more interesting affixes, that might work. And I think part of that is the Legendary game, and they're talking about that and improving Legendaries, which we'll get into here too. As far as the clumping of the affixes, well, Travis is going to talk about that here, so before I get into that, let's continue on. Quoting, as it relates to bucketing affixes so crit chance, crit damage, and attack speed are mutually exclusive, yeah, that would add more choice to item selection, but it would be artificial. I think this issue has some underlying causes that we should look at before going to the extreme of preventing them from existing on the same item. One of the first reasons trifecta items are an issue is that they are so good, or isn't that they're so good, sorry, is that they are the only thing that is good. Of course you want the only 3 stats that increase your character damage in a meaningful way on the same item, because there are only 3 stats that increase your character damage in a meaningful way other than your primary stat. I don't want to derail this by getting into why primary stats were introduced or debate whether they were good or bad. I do want to say that Diablo 3 has been through much iteration during which a vast number of approaches to stats and items were tested, and in the end, we felt primary stats were the right thing for Diablo 3. I think a better approach to this issue is to introduce more affixes that players are interested in, so there's a sense of tension over what the 6 affixes on your ideal gear. When a perfect pair of gloves is core stat, vital, resist all, crit chance, crit damage, attack speed, and you can't even imagine another stat that you would want instead of one of those, we have a bigger problem. Introducing more choice instead of less and giving players more ways to feel like they're customizing their character is what we want to see. If gloves had the ability to roll +% school damage, plus life on hit, spell-specific affixes, plus a couple more things you want, then players find themselves in a situation where trifecta isn't as clearly defined anymore. And there it is. I think that's kind of the crux of the matter here. The affixes as they exist just are not as compelling. And like you said, the trifecta thing is the big issue right now. But I find it interesting that he said it's not because that's so good, it's because everything else is just bad, comparatively. And that's just it. Trifecta is great because, yeah, that's damage, but I want to see something more interesting. And you know what really gets me, and I'll talk, I'm probably getting into this a bit early, but I remember in Diablo 2 finding things like set items. Maybe not so many uniques, but set items were not common, but they dropped enough to make leveling interesting and make me kind of want to go back and try a character with that item. And Diablo 3 doesn't exactly deliver on that. There are some lower level set items, but a lot of them have to be crafted, if not all. And I think that really limits the feel you have on these items. I mean, for example, technically there's a lot of set items, but you just don't see them a lot. And there's definitely a lot of legendaries. But at the same time, items in Diablo 2 felt more interesting. And part of that, I think he might have it, like +% to school damage. On gloves, getting life on hit on gloves. You know what? That's interesting because so far, I believe the only way to get life on hit is rings, amulets, and the weapon. So what if they could open that up to other items? He's right. All of a sudden, if you add all these different things that people might want onto gear, then maybe crit damage, crit chance, speed are not the best choices. In fact, I would love to see gear that makes me allows me to make a build that's not based on crit. Let's use the Demon Hunter and the Sentries, for example. Sentries don't crit. Okay, so that means I pretty much don't really want a lot of crit. What if I could get something that gives me +% damage to that particular, like they said, school of damage? So maybe I use a Fire Sentry or something. I'm just kind of throwing random examples out there. So great, I get this % to fire damage, get a Sentry with fire damage, and I'm good to go. And I don't need that crit chance or crit damage. I've got the affix that I want that's going to give me more damage for that skill, for that build. I think that is a great idea. So I definitely am in agreement with this. Make some of the affixes better. I know there's a lot of debate about game balance, where a lot of people say that restricting items is good, and others that say no, opening it up is better. And the weird thing is, and even Blizzard has said this, is that restricting people makes them have more variety. You might think that's kind of weird to say, but think about it. When they went from 7 skills to 6, from the beta into Diablo 3, to full release, one of the main reasons for that was that people could basically get everything they wanted out of 7 skills. With 6, you were just short of that perfect build that you wanted. And it causes creativity and it causes diversity, because then you have to decide what is most important to you and your character and your gear. So restricting a player in that manner means they have to be very careful about what they do. And even though it seems that restricts creativity, restricts builds, the truth of the matter is it really opens it up, because then there are more unique builds.
Suffering you're enduring. You must be dying to meet me.
It's a very interesting design philosophy. There becomes a point where you can be too restrictive.
Need more time.
And yet there is a point where you can open up things too much. I like to have a nice balance of structure with open-endedness. Honestly, I find that when things are far too open to me, I kind of have a hard time with it. Because there's so much that I could easily try to pick too much and just end up failing with it, really. And some people like that. They like to have that aspect of being able to completely screw it up. At least in Diablo it's not that bad because you can always reset your skills. Some games are not so nice. Well, let's move on. He's continuing to talk about the problem with trifecta. So we say here, the problem with trifecta items can't be discussed without also pointing out that it is only a problem because the auction house makes obtaining these items so easy. On a basic level, I have no problem with these items existing, and that players highly desire. But when it is a foregone conclusion that you will have those items, then we have problems. If the auction house never existed, players wouldn't be upset that trifecta exists. They would be upset that they hadn't been lucky enough to find their own trifecta items. So to summarize, I think that the right solution to this problem isn't cutting trifecta items from the game, but rather it's about getting to a point where you want more things that you can fit into an item. I think that your affix ideas are cool, and we have spent a lot of time lately talking about what kind of awesome effects we could put on items that we don't currently have. I'd even say that as cool as some of these ideas are, we can go even further. We're putting a lot of effort into coming up with really awesome item ideas for future content. I'll give you one quick example of my personal favorite so far before moving on, and we'll also give context and direction where we're moving in. Imagine a pair of legendary boots that read, "Makes you ethereal, allows you to freely move through enemies." Whether or not that idea makes the final cut is hard to say, but we want to really push the boundaries as much as we can so legendary items become things that players can really get excited about. And there it is. There it is. Getting excited about legendary items, and I so much agree with that. I think that is really, really needed. I mean, they went in the right direction with the last patch that buffed legendaries. There's some really good stuff in there, but they really could go further, and I think they could open up even more items. I was talking about the set items just a moment ago. I would really like more of those. Now, there's a really cool idea they're coming up here. We'll get to that about legendary and set items, and I think it's going to be great that will really open up the possibilities here. But adding things like that, the unique items, truly getting unique, I think that is the problem that Diablo 3 had. And again, we talk about efficiency. That's kind of part of it here. There's not enough items in Diablo with enough weird affixes on them to shake up the gameplay enough. Okay? Let me go to Path of Exile again for an example. They have a set of gloves that make it so that if you don't have a weapon, you do more damage. Massive damage, and you can build a build around this item. That is one of the coolest things you can do. Make an item that completely changes gameplay. Now, there are some in the game so far, like some Witch Doctor legendaries that reduce the cooldown on, say, zombie dogs. You could use the zombie dogs as an attack. Summon dogs, blow them up, summon dogs, because you have no cooldown on them anymore. That's great, but they need more. They need more. And it sounds like that's where they're going, and I am very happy by that. I just really would have liked to have seen some more legendary and set items scattered throughout the levels that make it interesting. I can talk about, say, Torchlight 2, if you look through the playthrough I have there. And I found 3 unique items in that game already. And I'm not even partway through the first act. They're not great unique items, but they're there, and some of them have some interesting things to them that I wasn't expecting. Nothing big yet, but it's there. The seeds are there. So this is kind of getting me excited about it. I want to see what they can do. I want them to be as creative as possible. I want Blizzard to sit down and come up with the craziest ass idea they could come up with for an item and just put it out there. If they need to balance it by giving it horrible stats, I don't care. Make it something fascinating, interesting, unique that I haven't seen. Moving on from here, we're going to character customization. So Travis says, your system idea for Nephilim Power Stat is basically a roundabout way of suggesting we re-implement the Diablo 2 skill system. The old skill system was fun back in the day, but I think it's honestly dated in today's landscape. People fondly remember making tons of characters and trying out different builds. Interjection, I did. Back to Travis. And while I have a lot of these same fond memories, I also remember that usually the end result of my time investment in my cool new character was complete and utter disappointment. Today, the availability of websites or posts about character builds would mostly overshadow any of that old character re-rolling. You would read a post saying someone else tried the build and that you had imagined would be amazing, only to find out it was awful, or you would find out it was great and build it also. The skill system today allows people the flexibility to try out things they enjoy without penalizing players who want to experiment with new ideas. The only difference is if their idea doesn't pan out, you needn't waste hours leveling a bad character. Okay, before I move on to the next paragraph there, I agree with that. I fully do. Anyone who's followed me, who's watched me, you know that. What do I love about this game is the fact that I can customize my character every time I play it. Almost every time I've sat down to play my Witch Doctor and recorded a video, I've had a different build of some sort. And I really like that. Every time I level up, I've got new skills and I play around with my build and I try something just different. I haven't really gone too far off the walls lately as far as trying to make something super unique because I've increased the difficulty levels. But if I wanted to, I could, and I love that idea. I love to experiment and try new things. I like seeing what I can do. What kind of crazy build in my head could I make that works? So I fully agree with him on this one. Now, I think you could still do that kind of system even with skill trees, as long as you had a way to respect them. Because the truth of the matter is, a lot of my time in Diablo 2 was just like he mentioned here. I remade characters over and over and over again for two reasons. One, maybe I found a piece of gear that made me want to level up again because it had a game-changing effect, or was just really cool and I wanted to try it out at low levels since I had leveled beyond it. Or two, to try a different build. And the problem with some of the things about making new builds in Diablo 2 is I would have a build in my head, and I would want to build towards it, but I would have a hard time getting there because the leveling process was so slow at times, and putting the points where I wanted them meant that my low-level characters were kind of gimped. You know, if I were saving my points for something very specific, it was kind of hard at times because of that, and the characters at low levels weren't that interesting. You didn't have a lot of skills at low levels. So while you might have had this really great idea for a final build, you kind of had to slog through the game with a low-level character to get to it. So that's one thing I really liked about Diablo 3, is it lets me go through and I can change my build. Now, granted, if I really want to change things up, I got to get new gear. And if I want to make a build around crit, obviously I need to go get the crit gear. If I want to make a build around attack speed, I got to go get the attack speed gear. But I have that option, and I don't have to do it by re-leveling a whole new character, and I like that. Alright, moving on. Character optimization is fun. People want more ways to feel different from their neighbor. And we want to provide players with more options in this regard as well. There are lots of things that we have discussed and some ideas we have for long-term system additions to the game to help in this regard. One of them, which I mentioned in another post, is the plan to eventually introduce a system to allow players to customize their character appearance more. Another system we haven't talked about before is the long-term plan to change the way the Paragon system works to allow it to offer more character customization in the form of actual power. The details of that system are still being worked out, and players probably won't get their hands on it for quite a while. We do agree that character customization is important, and we want more ways for players to both express themselves and differentiate themselves from friends and other members of the community. Now, this is going to lead into them basically allowing what World of Warcraft players might refer to as transmogrification. At least that's the vibe I'm getting from Blizzard at this point. Transmog in WoW was pretty cool because, you know, you could work and find this really cool looking piece of gear, and then you could be, you know, in the high-end raids, find a better piece of gear, but you didn't like the way it looked. And the thing about MMOs is basically building your character the way you want him to look. In Diablo, I never really thought that was a big deal. In fact, in Diablo 2, there were kind of just only a few set pieces, or a few different looking pieces, and they were kind of like piecemeal together as you got them into different tiers. And there really wasn't a big push or a big deal when it came to character customization, because pretty much every character looked alike until they got the gear for it. And honestly, the whole random loot system in Diablo lends itself to, well, that kind of creates your look. Now, it's not necessarily the best look, but it's yours, and it's the items that you have. I'm kind of mixed on this. I like Transmog in WoW. I really did. I'm just not entirely sure I'm convinced that it's going to have a place in Diablo. But I guess then again, having customization is not necessarily a bad thing, right? If they can add it in and it's not taking resources from anything else, people want it, then by all means they should put it in. I have no qualms with it. I just, I don't know. I don't really feel like I spend a ton of time looking at my character and how it looks. Although, I suppose that's not entirely true, because one of the things I really did love was when I got a Mimpo of Twilight one time. I loved the way it looked. And unfortunately it was just a piece of trash, because I found it before the whole Legendary update. I really wanted to wear it. I really, really did. So I suppose if I were going to be honest with myself in this regard, so it sounds like I'm kind of going back and forth. Well, the truth of the matter it is, because this is my process here, my thought process on would this be good, would this be bad. And I thought, kind of thought there at first, it's like, well, who really notices the character? And then I remember, oh, hey, I had this really cool item. And lately I just haven't had many items that kind of made me think that. But that Mimpo was one of the big ones. And, this system, if it works right, could be good. But it makes me wonder, though, because the item I wanted to wear was a Legendary, how would this work? Would they let you do this Transmogrification thing with Legendary items? Because Legendary items are supposed to look unique. I mean, hell, for the longest time we couldn't do anything with Legendary items when it came to dyes. We couldn't turn them invisible. They finally let us turn them invisible if we don't want to wear that Legendary item. So, I don't know. I don't know where that's going to go. And if anyone wants to share their thoughts, by all means. My apologies about going back and forth on that, but again, when I look at this, I think about it, and I tend to think aloud, as you may know. Well, let's move on. We've got the next topic of too many items. I cover this topic in some depth on the upcoming item blog that the community is in the process of getting ready for release next week. I'll briefly say that we agree that too many items drop, and we have plans to eventually reduce the rate that players see items, while also taking measures to improve the general quality of items you do see. The end result should be fewer items that are better, instead of tons of items you don't want. Now that's later on. That was introduced a little earlier here in this week, and they're actually talking about increasing the the range of the stats that you can get. So for example, if an item drops somewhere between 1 and 100 on a stat, they will reduce how many rares drop and make it so that the rares that do drop, instead of having a 1 to 100, might have a 80 to 100. They want to consolidate this, and I think this might not be a bad idea. They want to consolidate it so that items that drop mean more to you. Because as it is, you get a bunch of items, you ignore the whites, some people ignore the blues. I mean, it's a sea of items, and they want to pick up the yellows, and then the yellows turn out to be useless. How do you fix that? Well, you need to make them better, but if you make them better and there's still too many dropping, then you're going to oversaturate everything. So they want to scale it back. They want the item drops, the rare item drops, to be less frequent, but they want it to be something that you're actually excited and happy to see. I'm not entirely sure on that one. I think I agree with that one, honestly, because again, I'll compare this to, say, our Path of Exile. So many items drop in that game, and I have a hard time discerning which item is an item that I want. Because in that game, even white items are kind of important and can be a big deal. But sometimes I think having that much loot, I mean, it's cool at first. It's like, hey, look, there's this fountain of loot. There's loot everywhere. Oh my god, this is amazing. And then you kind of sit back and you're like, oh my god, this is confusing. And it's like, there's so much stuff here that I have to dig through. And then it becomes a chore. I think there should be that excitement that this really cool thing just dropped. Now, legendary items somewhat fulfill this, but I'd like to see more of it. It's like, you should be excited that that thing dropped. As it is right now, I practically don't even pay attention to yellows. When I did my video on Demonic Essence, I didn't even realize that I picked up Demonic Essence because it was yellow colored. I sat there, it's like, oh, another yellow, another yellow, another yellow, blah, blah, blah. Who cares? Who cares, right? Who cares? It's a yellow. I'm going to spend part of my time unwrapping it, right-click to identify, and it's going to be absolute arse. Total and complete ass. And I don't like that. I want to be genuinely happy that I found this rare item. So I'm okay with this. Alright, finding your own gear. Quoting, whenever we talk about what the fantasy of Diablo is, and what we want the core gameplay to be, Never do we say we want players to farm gold and go buy items off the auction house. The auction house definitely has made an impact on Diablo 3, and we talk about it constantly. But our conversations are usually in the context of how can we get players to find their own loot instead of buying it. The new crafting recipes and demonic essences were added to provide a little bit of this gameplay, but we have left a lot of ideas for long term about how we want to go about addressing this. At the end of the day, it is our intention that players are able to find their own items because we feel the game is just more fun that way. There are several reasons why it might not feel that way right now. One is the inherent randomness of our loot system. Another is the fact that the auction house completely removes all friction between player trades. And another is when players do find the items that they should be excited about, they're often disappointed because the items are not very good. All of these items are very important, and we hope to address them over time. So again, going into that, the auction house once again making it very easy to find the items you want, therefore the whole process of unwrapping items is completely lost at this point when you think about it. Right? Why do I care when I'm just hoping for that one in a long shot, right? That one in a million to be able to sell or to beat what I can find on the auction house. Alright, not too much to say about that one. We're going to move on to skill diversity. This is something we constantly strive to improve. Yes, there are a lot of runes and abilities that are lacking, but as you can see with our patches, we try over time to improve the balance of them regularly. In some cases, runes are designed to just be fun or cool. In other cases, we try to make a large spectrum of runes competitive, but the math ends up favoring one or the other. In some cases, certain abilities or abilities combinations are so potent that they overshadow almost every other option available. Whirlwind, Sprint, Battle Rage is a good example of this. There are some cool ideas here, but I don't want to turn this post into a discussion about specifics of design. This is a problem that we can't fix overnight, but we are confident that over time we can constantly improve the situation and hope the community can see that we are making efforts on this front with every patch we release. And that's a big thing there, is the skill diversity, and unfortunately, here's my thoughts on what Blizzard has done with this. I've been very happy to see the buffs coming out, and I'm sure a lot of people are happy that they've been buffing rather than nerfing things. And that's well and good, but you can't buff too much, alright? Let me stress that. You cannot buff too much, because if you do, then you just trivialize everything else. Alright, so a lot of people like to say, oh, never nerf, you should always buff. That's not true. It is not true. And Blizzard is not the only company that does this. Even Path of Exile has done a little bit of that, where they felt they needed to nerf something. When you bring everything up to the overpowered level, then everything is overpowered, and then you need to compensate it in some way. But my problem is not necessarily with the buffing or nerfs or whatever. It's just that everything is damaged lately. Possibly durations. I would like to see some fundamental changes to some skills. Make some skills far more interesting, give them better use. You know, make something far... It's kind of like the items, making something unique and making it worth getting. Make some of these skills worth trying out because they do something just a little bit different, and the monk skills have been the one that they've talked about the most on that. And they've talked about changing them in a more fundamental way rather than just damage. They just haven't done it yet. And I think they're waiting for a major patch for that, which unfortunately means possibly an expansion pack. Crafting! Quoting, what crafting was meant to be and what it ended up being aren't necessarily the same. Again, there are a long list of reasons why it turned out to be a bit underwhelming for some people. Not the least of which is the existence of the auction house. Why make random things when you can buy exactly what you're looking for? We're constantly exploring new ideas for how to make crafting more relevant and trying to carve out a more defined role for it within the scope of Diablo 3's itemization. We have discussed ideas such as letting players have some control over which stats will appear on the item they are crafting, using the crafting system to allow players to re-roll the values or affixes of an item that an item already has, etc., etc. This is a system that, with time, should be able to find a better place in the overall gameplay experience of Diablo. Okay, I'm glad they talked about that. Crafting, yeah. Is it a failure? Pretty much. The new demonic essence thing, you know, that's a good step in the right direction because the demonic essence items that you can craft really are better than pretty much what you can find in a lot of cases, not all. But because of their intrinsically high stat value for primary stats, they're very useful. But they are definitely still lacking. See, the crafting system is great, and in fact, I was really happy about the crafting system. I mean, I put out videos on the crafting system because I rather liked it. I thought it was really cool that I could start making items for my level in case I was having bad drops, and it worked for me because I didn't use the auction house. You know who it didn't work for? People who use the auction house. You know, I haven't been an advocate for removing the auction house, but I gotta tell you, of all the issues it's caused, I honestly think that maybe without it, it would have been a good idea. But we run into the problem again, that whether or not Blizzard included an auction house, there would have been sites out there for it. There would have been sites out there to sell gold, to sell items, all of that. And Blizzard wanted to create a safe environment for that. The other problem, and the reason why they're not just going to get rid of it, because people have been saying that, hey, why don't you just get rid of the auction house? Why are they not going to do that? Because some people like the auction house. People like it. It is being used. Well, just because it's being used don't mean they like it. Okay, let's go ahead and say that. That's true. But some people do like it, and some people will defend it. And some people say, why don't you add an option to just let us have characters that are not auction house? You know, that's really a silly idea when you think about it. If you don't want to use the auction house, then don't use it. You don't need a check mark that lets you say, hey, can you use the auction house or can't you? It's really kind of pointless to throw that in. Show a little self-restraint if you don't want the auction house. Now, I'll admit I've broken down and I bought items off the auction house, but it was never anything really great. But I like the fact that if I sat and I had a long session of where I couldn't find anything, I could at least try and get a minor upgrade off the auction house. Because my major problem with the auction house, if I really used it to get the best items and the best gear, then why the hell am I playing this game? If I've got the best items I can have from the auction house, what is my point of playing the game? Honestly, the item thing is completely blown out the window at that point.
That was fun.
So I suppose the only real reason I would play the game at that point would be just to kill monsters. Okay, you know what? That's great. Honestly, that's great. But that only lasts for so long. Eventually, even that would kind of get boring. Part of the reason why the game seems to have a long-lasting appeal and has this kind of compellingness to it is because you can sit there and not only have fun killing monsters, but every now and then you just might find this really cool item. And you'd be like, wow, that is awesome. I want to try that. Or maybe even you find something for another character and you're like, wow, I should play that character now. Alright, let's move on because we have spent a lot of time here. Social features. This is an area that has a lot of room for improvement. I personally used to talk about the fact that when I would play with my brother and two of my good friends, I consistently felt like they were a detriment to my ability to farm, which is at the core of my enjoyment of a Diablo series. Since then, we have made changes to improve the co-op experience, like reducing the health multiplier of additional players and removing the damage scaling when more players join the game. However, we need to do more to improve both the in and out of game experience. We want it to be easier for players to find other like-minded people to play with, and this is a topic we are actively trying to improve in the near future. Okay, so trying to make it better to play co-op. I can understand that. I think, honestly, they did go in the right direction with that. The monster health scaling was fine, but when they did the damage scaling, oh my goodness, was that horrible. For a ranged character, it might not have been too bad, but man, I can tell you, as a barbarian, it sucked ass. Oh my god, did I hate it. I hated playing with my friends. I'm not afraid to say it. I hated it. Why? Because with that, what was it, like 15% or something? It was whatever amount of damage increase those monsters did. Rather than being able to take a hit or two and survive as a melee character, I was getting one shot like crazy. Areas I could farm on my own. If I played with my friends, I couldn't do a thing. I'd basically have to stand behind them and let them do the killing. That's a horrible feeling. That is a seriously horrible feeling. I don't like being a detriment to my team. I want to be useful. I want to help. You know, most of all, I want to have fun. That's not fun. I I don't know what this means as far as this conversation here because it really doesn't elaborate. So, well, you're kind of looking forward to seeing what they say because as of right now, I think they've got things kind of in a different, in a nice spot. The co-op monsters are a bit tougher, but you know they kind of need to be with more characters in the game. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. So, Travis Day's conclusion. Okay, I've reread this thing enough times that my brain is starting to melt. The Diablo team is incredibly passionate and constantly striving to make the game we love even better. I hope this post helps clear the air about where we stand on a lot of these topics, and I hope I never find myself never feeling the need to write a post this long again. Yes, thank you, Travis. Now, that has been a long conversation here. We are basically already at the 1 hour mark. Are practically at the 1 hour mark because there will be some editing here. This is mostly live commentary, but yes, there will be some flubs and dead air editing as I go over the articles. So yeah, we've already gone quite a bit farther than I intended, so let's go ahead and try and get through some of the newer topics so that we can get ourselves caught up to date here. So going to the improvement of item affixes. This is, again, from Travis Day. This is a great and constructive thread, which brings up both a lot of good ideas and valid points. Items is a topic of conversation on a daily basis. We talk about where they are currently, where we want them to be, and how to get them there. Some of the future changes involve making item affixes that aren't currently good into something that at least some players are really excited to see. A good example of this is pickup radius in Witch Doctors. Sure, not everybody wants a lot of pickup radius on their gear, but there are some specs of Witch Doctors that love it and want it as much as possible, and we want to expand that idea further. Thorns is a good example of a stat that, at its core, has potential, but in reality falls short. While we plan to improve Thorns by allowing players' primary stat to increase its damage, we have other plans that help further embrace Thorns for specific classes and specs. Increasing the availability of skill-specific affixes and school damage affixes is also something we plan on doing. They have the potential to open up more fun and varied character builds, as well as simply giving players another way to improve abilities they enjoy. An example that has previously worked is zombie dogs and sacrifice using zombie dog cooldown items, wall of zombie cooldown items with pile on, and hammer the ancients with cost reduction items. We like that these builds exist and want to open up even more builds by virtue of expanding the availability of these affixes. We want items to make you feel more powerful, but more importantly, we want players to feel like items can be game changers. We want players to find items and think to themselves, whoa, I want to try making a spec for this thing, or man, I'm totally going to level a monk to use this thing. Improving the overall feel of Diablo item game is something that is incredibly important to us and is receiving a lot of attention from our development team because it's important to you all as well. So again, that focuses on, as I talked about, unique items that are actually unique. Path of Exile does this with a lot of their stuff, and I really think that Blizzard could easily do this if they would just let themselves go out of the box and just go wild with it. So I'm so happy to see them talking about this. I'm just really sad that it took this long to get there. I really am. I really, really, really am. I love Diablo 3. I really do. But I'm not going to say it's perfect. I've never said it's perfect. It's got its flaws. And as we can see here, it's really got some deep-seated issues. But thankfully, the game is still at least fun, at least to me, and to some of you out there. Some of you have probably given up hope. But some of you are out there, maybe you're not playing now, but you're seeing this, you're hearing this, and you might be saying, wow, that sounds really cool. I might go back and play the game if they do this. And I think that's the important thing, is that they are continuing to support this game like this, and work really, really hard on it. Now, a lot of people might say, well, yeah, they're making money off the auction house. Why not support the game? Well, I honestly don't think Blizzard's making as much money as a lot of people think they are with that. I mean, they could easily have... Seriously, think about this. They could have easily had included anti-consumer payment methods for this auction house, asking for a percentage of everything you sell. Instead, they want just a simple $1 transaction fee for each item. They could be making far more money off of this. People have sold items for quite a bit. There are people that sold items for like $250 out there. You know, and the thing is that Blizzard is getting only a small fraction of the money that some players have made in that regard. I think that's really cool that they allowed that to happen. They allowed a player to make $250 on an item on a digital freaking game. An item that they technically created because it's random. They didn't really create it. But you get the idea. I think that's cool that they would let that happen. They could totally have gone anti-consumer on this. And while you might not like the fact that there's always on, this whole always on DRM thing, whew, especially with the whole SimCity thing that's been happening lately, I think they're doing a pretty good job of it, honestly. I mean, there are problems, but they've tried their best to smooth over a lot of it. So, there is an article here about the Diablo on PC. And they wanted to try and reassure us that Diablo is primarily a PC game. And honestly, a lot of people say that a lot of decisions that were made because it could have been on console, I just didn't see it. There were some things that were probably could have been easier for consoles, but the truth of the matter is a lot of the decisions they made looked like they were more streamlining things than anything. I mean, hell, if you look at Diablo on the consoles, you look at the screenshots they've got, a lot of the stuff has changed. There are new UIs and everything, and skills are going to be revamped in order to use a controller better. So I honestly think this whole thing about, well, Diablo was developed for a console and not a PC, I just think that's false. I'm going to just flat out say it. I don't agree with that. And unfortunately, since we're talking about the PC versus console thing, I stated in, I believe, one of the Witch Doctor videos when we were talking about this, that I didn't know if there was going to be cross-platform play or if they were going to allow the joystick controls on the PC that they were putting on the console, because I would really like to play Diablo with my controller just to try it out. Unfortunately, they did kind of give us the answer to that. No, there will not be cross-platform play. And no, the console version of Diablo 3 is completely unique. So the things that they're doing that for the UI and for the controller are not going to be in the PC version for all intents and purposes. So, yeah, that kind of sucks. But just because I'd kind of like to try it, I guess I'd have to buy it on the console if I want to. I don't think I'll be doing that. But hey, here's the big thing. There will be offline mode for the PC. There will be offline mode for the console version of Diablo 3. You do not have to have an always-on connection. So what does this mean for the future of Diablo 3 on the console? Well, speculation on this one is that there will not be an auction house for the console. I can't entirely disagree with that. Look at the drama that the auction house has caused. And the thing is it's probably going to be harder to find a third-party auction house site for a console game over a PC. So I don't think it's going to be as much of an issue there. And unfortunately, it almost makes it seem like the console version of Diablo might be the better version. And that's not by design. I assure you, I'm confident that that is not by design. I just think that because if they do that, if they actually take out the auction house, they're going to find that the community or the gameplay of the console version of Diablo is going to be that much better because people have to find the items now. And you're not going to have that super huge discrepancy in power. We'll have to see. They haven't made an announcement yet, so I just don't know. I really don't. Alright, we're almost caught up here. So this is the developer journal for the itemization update. This was released on the 5th of March, so we're getting a little closer here. So what do they say? They talk about rarity equals power. One of the big things we want to focus on is making sure items that feel like they are rare and powerful are actually powerful instead of just rare. The first and most obvious place for improvement here is Legendaries. By design, legendary items are going to drop far less often than rare items, and we want that rarity to be reflected in their power. When a legendary drops, the question that goes through your player's mind should never be, is this a good item? It should be, how awesome is it? For example, if you're playing a demon hunter wielding a rare crossbow and a legendary crossbow drops, we want your reaction to be, holy crap, yes, not another hell rack. It's a problem if players don't want to bother identifying their legendaries, let alone pick them up. We want to change this. Yes, thank you, Blizzard, that is what I want to see. I want these legendaries to be truly legendary. You know, the whole idea when this game first came out that legendaries were not that good was horrible. I agreed. Let me put it this way. At first, I agreed with their philosophy that a rare item that rolls good should be better than a legendary because it gives you that sense of wonderment, that sense of, hey, you could get this really random item that's really good. I like that idea. I really did. I didn't understand at the time the ramifications of that, though. The ramifications being that, hey, unfortunately, there's a lot of yellow items out there, and a lot of them are actually better than the legendaries they created. The other problem? Hey, look, hey, we've come full circle again. The auction house. That's right, the auction house. Because there were rare items that were rolling really good out there, they were being sold on the auction house. So who cared about legendaries? Seriously. Man, when this game first came out, legendaries were crap. I remember finding my first legendary, and I was so dejected. It was like a spirit stone for the monk, I think. And I hated it. I was like, man, I wouldn't even put that on my monk if I had one. It's like I found better items along the way. I support this change. Alright, legendary stat ranges. Lots of factors go into making an item good, and one of those factors is how high the stats on an item can roll. When the game first launched, an item's potential stats were largely indicated by its item level. This made it so that you would know in advance whether or not an item was worth the trouble identifying. In 1.05, we made it so that the stat ranges for affixes were based on the level of the monster or container that dropped the item rather than the item's level, which created the possibility of more items rolling competitive values. We'd like to continue with this line of reasoning and use it to make legendaries more powerful. In the future, we plan to allow legendary items to also roll their base stats, weapon, DPS, armor value, at the level of the monster that dropped the item. So, for example, if you found that a Heart of Iron from a level 63 monster, its base armor would be increased to that of Archon armor, and its stat ranges would roll at level 63. This gives us the opportunity to broaden the range of legendary items, providing players with more diversity. Love Leoric Signet, but hate wearing a level 17 ring? Me too! Instead of farming Act 2 normal to find Leoric Signet, let's go farm Inferno and get a level 63 version of the ring. Everything we're suggesting for legendaries also applies to sets, by the way. Hallelujah! Let me just say that. Hallelujah! Because that right there will open up the amount of legendaries available for high-level players. All of these low-level legendaries that seem like they might be cool at first, but they'll quickly get outstriped. Now you can get all of these items that are really neat and get them at a level 63 item level. That is great! It also means that there's more legendaries and set items available to drop while you're leveling. It's very possible that while you're leveling, you may find a legendary or set item that you normally wouldn't have found until high level, and so it kind of gives you something neat to play around with. I mean, and maybe even it helps you complete the set later on. If you find like a first piece of a set at a low level, granted, it kind of sucks to use it for the full completed set later, but if you needed to, and the set bonus was worth it, you could try it. I mean, that's kind of cool. You know, and if you like playing low-level characters and you like going back, then that gives you a reason to hold on to it and give it to that low-level character. I mean, that's cool. You just kind of pass it on, almost like an heirloom item. I think it would be neat if they, you know, here's an idea. Here's an idea. What if they gave you a crafting recipe that if you did find a low-level legendary or set item while you're playing the game and leveling, a crafting recipe that would let you bring it up to level 63. You have to find the item to begin with, right? So why not let me craft it to make it better? I mean, don't make it cheap, but there you go. There's another way that you could use crafting vendors to help your item progression along. I mean, the vendors right now are kind of collecting dust except for the demonic essence thing. There you go. That's not a bad idea. I think it could work. That's another one that I'd be interested in your comments, your thoughts, alright? So if you like that idea, let me know. Or if you have a suggestion, please. I am very interested in seeing where the conversation could go. Alright, moving on to item diversity, increased item diversity. Item diversity is a topic that comes up a lot. Right now, when people are talking about the best items in the game or looking for ways to improve their power, they gravitate towards items with critical chance, critical damage, and attack speed. While these stats are great for boosting your damage, they aren't necessarily interesting or what we like to call game-changing. We want players to feel like entire new builds can open up if they got their hands on the right items. Glimmers of this idea are already in the game, with the 300th Spear and the Thing of the Deep. The plan is to embrace the idea and push them into more extremes. Potential future legendary item ideas include a voodoo mask that increases pet damage, a barbarian set that makes Call of the Ancients last until they die, a wizard orb that allows for 2 hydras to be active at a time, or the ethereal boots he talked about earlier. While these specific ideas may not make it into the game, they are good examples of kind of game-changing effects we want to introduce with the items. It'll take time, but our goal is to try and provide players with compelling alternatives to trifectas. You know, I like that. I mean, honestly, it might sound overpowered, but a whole Call of the Ancients that lasts until you die as a set, you know, just make it really hard to get the set. Well, auction house, whatever. That's kind of cool. That's what I'm talking about. Get something neat. You know what Diablo 2 used to do is it let you use skills from other classes. What if they did something like that? A proc, or it'd be kind of hard to make it a skill you can use because of the way the skill system works in Diablo 3, but something like that. Because that was kind of neat in Diablo 2, playing a class and having the skill of another. I thought was kind of cool, kind of neat. I'd say neat again, but I liked it. So I'm interested to see what they do there. I think this is a really cool thing here that they're talking about. Just making these, just again, thinking outside the box. What can we throw out there to make Legendaries far more interesting? Now here we're going to talk specifically about the less items dropping. I had mentioned, I kind of went into more detail about this earlier, but let's go ahead and talk about it. This is from the developer's post. Again, quoting, "Between Paragon levels, Nephilim Valor stacks, and all other assorted buffs and bonuses, it's possible to find a tremendous amount of rare items during any given play session. But the quality of these rare items isn't where it needs to be. So even though players see a lot of them, they no longer feel special. When you identify hundreds of rares and have only a small percentage that are worth equipping or selling, those items become a burden rather than something to get excited about. Great, now I have to identify them all, read their stats, and probably going to salvage all of them. I feel your pain. We want to make it fun and rewarding to hunt down items through play, and really instill a feeling that your next awesome item could come from anywhere, and is just around the corner. We need to get rid of some of the clutter first, so we plan to reduce the frequency at which rare items drop down the road. Before anyone panics and posts an angry comment in the forums, this doesn't mean we want players to earn even fewer good items. It just means we don't feel it's necessary to present the player with hundreds of bad rares for every one that they might want. As an example, suppose items roll between 1 and 100 intelligence. Now, imagine that we drop 25% as many items, but the intelligence range was instead somewhere around 75 to 100. In the end, you find fewer items, but many of the items you find would be worth equipping, and that's our goal. On the topic of identifying hundreds of rares, it's worth adding that while most of this blog is about overall item philosophy and our goals down the road, one of the short-term changes we're making is adding an Identify All option, which should be coming in 1.0.8.
Oh, blessed be! A replacement for Deckard Cain! Finally, you can identify your stuff without the blast of the Herodrum! Is this not fortuitous?
Indeed it is. Indeed it is. This is something that has been sorely needed for a while, and I'm happy to see that it's finally making a comeback. So, since they mentioned these item changes, and we're talking about 1.08, 1.08 is not that far off, I imagine. And a lot of this talk is high level. We're not going to see a lot of this in 108. The item changes for the stats and reducing them, I'm not sure that's going to hit 108. There's a lot of this that just isn't going to be ready for that. The changes to Legendaries, the massive changes, probably won't be in 108 either. Those might be more for 109 or something like that. They like to tell us in advance about a lot of this stuff before it's ready. And yet at the same time, you notice that they don't tell us everything because they don't like to commit to things that they're not going to do. In this case, if they're telling us this philosophy, it means they have a pretty strong idea that they're going to be doing a lot of this, and it's going to make it, and they want to let us know. And they like to give us warning. Unfortunately, that affects the economy, because as people know, more items are coming out that are going to be better, and so selling some items right now might not be that easy. Some people got upset about that, but the truth of the matter is, I would rather them tell us. I would rather know what's coming down the pipe. I really do. Okay, so we're going to talk about gold sinks and how they should be exciting. We frequently discuss the Diablo economy as we want players to feel that gold is a valuable commodity. Useful in ways beyond just the auction house. We don't want out-of-control inflation, but we also don't think that taxing players is the proper approach. Ultimately, we want to provide players with things that they are excited to spend their hard-earned gold on. The most concrete example of how we're supporting this philosophy would be the crafting recipes we introduced in 107. While they aren't meant to be the silver bullet for all economic concerns, they provide more avenues for people to spend their gold to receive something that they can be happy about. In this case, potential upgrades for their character or alts. Other avenues we want to explore include providing players with vanity options or potential ways to differentiate themselves from their friends or other characters, i.e. character customization options in terms of gear. We're also exploring ways to make crafting more exciting by adding not just more ways to make appealing items, but also introducing ways to modify existing items. So that goes back to what we talked about, character customization options in terms of gear. That sounds like transmog to me. I have a feeling that's what they're looking at. And then we talk again about crafting items to modify existing items. I think that could go hand in hand with the idea I talked about a moment ago about allowing the low-level legendaries that we'll be able to drop now with the new item changes that they're talking about to bring those back up to the current high level. I think those would be excellent ways of doing some gold sinking as well. So something they might want to consider and look at. So lastly, on this developer's blog, we have Farm Monsters, Not the Auction House. The Auction House is a new addition to the Diablo franchise, and while it serves many purposes for our players and it helps to keep the economy fluid, some would argue that it has done more harm to the game than good. There is value to be had in providing players with a way to freely exchange unwanted items for gold, or giving demon hunters an easy means to sell unwanted rubies in order to purchase emeralds. But the question has to be asked, is what the auction house provides worth what it took away from some players? If the right way for some people to play the game changes from killing monsters to camping the auction house, is the game better off for it? Ultimately, we don't think it is, but we also don't want to take something away that has become such an enjoyable part of the game for others. So the question instead becomes, how can we refocus the end game away from farming the auction house back to farming monsters? It's a complicated issue, but one we're committing to addressing. The first solution always presented when we discuss this problem is, why don't you just get rid of the auction house? And while completely removing the feature would in fact fix problems it created, it would also create a void that the auction house was originally designed to address. For example, we don't want players to feel like the only way to trade with other people is by sitting in chat spamming WTS item link and WTB awesome item all day. This is definitely not ideal. There are a number of ideas for how to address this long term that don't include removing the auction house outright, and most of the ideas are centered around giving players more ways to find items they are excited about. One idea, as we've discussed, is targeted legendaries, where named NPCs have an increased chance of dropping specific legendary items. For example, the Butcher could have an increased chance of dropping the Butcher's Cleaver. Alright, I'm going to stop right there and say I like that idea. Targeted legendaries is a neat idea, and something I'm kind of surprised they didn't explore previously. Basically, allowing some of these certain mythical creatures, or big bosses or whatever, to have a better chance of dropping that item. That's a neat idea. Don't take it away from the other monsters. Make it so that it can still drop in the world, like the Butcher's Cleaver they're talking about. Make it so I can still find that item, right? Let's say I'm in Act 4. Yeah, right, like I would be in Act 4. Let's be more reasonable. Let's say I'm in Act 3, and I'm killing monsters. I want a chance to find that Butcher's Cleaver. But if I want to increase my chances, I want to go and kill the Butcher. I think that would work. Alright, the next idea is that we introduce a system that will help alleviate some of the bad randomness players encounter by ensuring that at least some of the rare and legendary items you find will be something good for your class. So that's cool. Removing stats from... I think what they're saying with that is like removing stuff that's not useful to your class from your legendaries. So you won't see strength on a Witch Doctor item anymore. Something like that. And lastly, they say, we've also discussed allowing bosses the first time you kill them in each difficulty to have a guaranteed chance to drop a legendary. Okay, that's neat. But with the new low-level legendary system they're talking about, that's kind of cool. You can now find legendaries from killing a boss, and it's a low level. Now, here's the thing. If they do decide to implement like the idea I talked about of making a low-level legendary high-level again through crafting, I'm not entirely sure that's the best way to go. Simply because that would cause this low-level farming thing where you go with a low level and kill all the bosses again and again and again as you go through the game just to get a whole bunch of legendaries, and what that does is that saturates the market for legendaries. Legendaries need to be special, they need to be unique. So if they do that, then obviously they're not going to include a way to make the legendaries maximum level, because then that just absolutely floods the auction house, floods the economy, floods players' inventories. You don't want that. So ultimately, I think I'm not entirely keen on that idea. While it would be really nice to see a legendary drop every time, I think no. I just don't think that's the best way to do it. Alright, so finally here, the list goes on and on. As with all design, nothing is ever final. This is just a snapshot of what we're working on currently with regards to itemization, and we hope to provide more specifics as we get closer to implementing these changes into the live game. In the meantime, we'd love to hear what you think about our approach, since much of what's cited above has been inspired by your feedback. So again, it's nice to see that Blizzard is taking feedback into consideration, as they usually do. A lot of people like to say they don't, but when it comes to good game design, you have to make a decision between what is the game community telling you and what is your vision. If you sacrifice your vision for what your players are asking for, then it's not your vision anymore, and then the game isn't what you designed it to be. It's one of those things where it's great to get feedback and make minor adjustments to make the game more interesting, but ultimately the game is Blizzard's. Ultimately it is a game they designed that we play, and we play by their rules. And because there are restrictions and designs in there that are not necessarily what we might have done, it's kind of what makes the game compelling. Because if they take everyone's idea, well, for one, if they take everyone's ideas, the game would go nowhere. Because nobody can agree. There could be a large outcry, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's what everybody wants. You talk about the vocal minority, that's kind of that. Just because a lot of people are vocal about something doesn't necessarily mean that's the best decision to make.
Shouldn't be hard to find around here.
Doesn't mean it should be completely ignored. But Blizzard takes all that feedback, and they consider what do we want to do, and what does the community want, and can we meet a middle ground. Alright, so that is mostly it. Just recently coming out on the 6th of March here, so looking closer to now, still about a week away. Yeah, I'm behind. I apologize for that. We have the Wyatt Chang and Travis Day on 106. So this is going to kind of give us an insight as to what to expect on the next patch, and again, it will let us know that a lot of what they talked about is very high-level concept and not quite ready for the next patch. So what they're saying there, we are spending time working on monster density in Acts 1, 2, and 4, because while optimal routes are inevitable, we want things to be close enough that options exist. Currently, we have a situation where a small number of specific runs are twice or more as effective as your average run. This margin is too large and overshadows those other factors. Our goal is to make the monster density in Inferno close enough that factors such as your skill choice and gear level start to become more relevant. Let's suppose you were trying to optimize your XP per hour. What if Cookie Cutter Archon build on Monster Power 1 had an optimal run, but an SNS Wizard on MP3 had a different optimal run? Different areas also have different monsters with different abilities. Some classes have an easier time dealing with particular monster types. This can cause the optimal run to shift as well. If we get the overall densities closer, these other factors will start to become more relevant rather than the current situation where the raw monster density of a run dominates all other factors. When things are close enough, you may try a run that is a little less XP per hour if it means increased demonic essences. Maybe you just really enjoy the art of the Act 1 jail. Maybe you just want some variety and haven't been to an area in a while. Maybe you want to do a full playthrough and co-op with a friend. It's a matter of degree. These aren't trade-offs most players would make when the run results in 50% loss in efficiency. But if the difference is 5 to 15%, then these other factors come into consideration. So like Liliara said, our goal is to avoid creating new, most optimal runs and instead provide players with an environment that allows them to choose from multiple different options. Alright, so that's an interesting statement, and you know what? That is something that Blizzard really gets caught up on, is the whole difference being 5 to 15%. You see that a lot when they talk balancing in World of Warcraft, that they want DPS classes to always be within this percentage. Unfortunately, their grand designs usually get smashed because a lot of theory crafters will say, hey, just because it's 1% more efficient, I'm going to run it anyway. Kind of like the builds. You know, if someone's 5% more DPS in WoW, they're like, no, I want that guy or that class because it's theoretically more, even though it's only a minor amount. But if they can get it close, then there's going to be plenty of people that aren't super theory crafting, that don't care about the most efficient, and they're going to want to have fun again. So I kind of like that idea. Again, I talked to her when we first mentioned this earlier. I said I wasn't sure on that because I felt it was just the whole efficiency thing. Just I didn't think that's where we needed to be. But you know, they have a point here. If they can make it so that these runs and builds are that close to each other, and then it will come down to fun, and it will come down to what is your character best suited to do. So I'm going to keep an eye on that. I will be interested to see how this plays out. Alright, continuing on with mob density, they say Acts 1, 2, and 4 will be receiving some adjustments in Inferno difficulties. They want to try and make all of the acts comparable as possible so that players don't feel they always have to farm the same areas of the game repeatedly. Diversity is the spice of life. They want to make it easier to craft lots of items, so they plan on giving players the ability to specify how many of an item they want to craft and then make that many. Want to make 20 Archon Shoulders of Dexterity. Cool, push the button, watch go. Great, great. I'm glad to see that. People have been wanting that. Auction House Tooltip Compare. They'll be adding that in 108, it looks like. That's fantastic. Including gems. That's awesome. Let's see. Itemization stuff in the blog. Right now, since 108 is still being developed, they aren't going to have a lot of additional details to share about what's included in the patch as development continues, though they'll be sure to share more information, most likely in the form of a patch preview blog like they've done in the past, as well as just talking about stuff in the forums. The distinction he was making with previous posts is that most of the changes that Travis discussed in his blog are not coming with 108, but are instead planned for some time after 1.08. So that's the important thing. A lot of that stuff that Travis talked about, the big Travis Day post, is not coming in the next patch. But it is definitely stuff to talk about, definitely stuff to get excited for, and I'm really, it's got me really looking forward to that. I mean, I'm not really excited about 108. From what I've heard, from what I'm seeing here, I'm not really seeing there's going to be a lot in 108, but I could be wrong. But I'll reserve judgment on that until I see some patch notes or a patch blog. And I'm looking forward to 109 and maybe 1.1 or 1.010 if they do a 1.010. That's kind of odd, but Blizzard's done it before. So I am kind of getting excited for it. This could really be interesting, and it could be kind of the punch in the arm that Diablo needs rather than the kick in the teeth it's been getting. Okay, so lastly, there was a post here in case you missed it about Travis Day, because there was speculation about who Travis Day was. People said that Travis Day was a guy that worked at Activision and was kind of an indicator that Activision had more control over Blizzard. And Travis wanted to basically let everybody know. I'll go ahead and just read it. He wanted to pop in real fast to set the record straight that since there was some confusion surrounding the question, I'm not the same Travis Day that works at Activision, though I do occasionally get emails intended for him, and we have had some laughs over that in the past. I have been a game designer at Blizzard for about 8 years. I used to work on World of Warcraft. Some of you may have seen me at early BlizzCons on WoW panels. I transferred to Diablo team because, like the rest of the development team, I'm passionate about the game and want to help contribute, making it even better. So he is not the same Travis Day a lot of people have seen at Activision. That's kind of funny, though, that you got two guys named Travis Day and pretty much in the same family of companies. I suppose it happens. It's just kind of a name that I wouldn't see happening that frequently. Well, that is honestly pretty much it. That should bring everything up to speed, and this is pretty much going to be a really long Diablo digest, really. This is kind of the first of its kind I've done, and so obviously I'm looking for feedback and I'm looking for discussions to see what everybody thinks. The whole reasoning for this was kind of twofold. One, I really wanted to talk about a lot of this. I really did, and I just didn't get the chance. A lot of stuff kept coming up, and again, more news kept coming out. But I really did want to put out a news update, because that's usually what I do with Diablo, because not everybody reads Diablo fans, and not everybody follows the forums, and Diablo fans is a great place for that. They have ways of tracking the forums, and they've got all these great news posts. And I know, and I've heard from some of my followers here that they prefer to get the news from here. So there is that. So I try to provide that service. So that's kind of the first thing, is just getting the news out there. And of course the second one is the opinion side. As with any of these, I like to interject a slight opinion on what I feel about them and the outlook of the game. Alright, I am probably more optimistic than a lot of people that look at the game. So this could be a good thing. It could come around to bite me in the ass, because a lot of people like controversy. But there it is. So hopefully you found this enjoyable. I did this, as you can see, in kind of the podcast style, mostly live. There's a few edits here and there from minor flubs, but that's okay. And if you'd like to see more of these as I can get them, great. I would be more than happy to do them. Of course, I kind of need major news to do that. So this isn't, please keep in mind, this is not going to become a major weekly or monthly feature, maybe like the old Diablo casts or something like that. This is just something I wanted to do personally, but who knows? There could be more, there could be a future in it, who knows? But again, the biggest part that I'd like to hear is what you guys think, and I hope that this is maybe opened up some either dialogue amongst yourselves, or maybe opened up your minds as to what this game could be and how it actually could be great were some of these changes implemented. A lot of people like to say that Diablo is dead and that it's never going to be good, and I don't agree with that. I don't agree it's dead, because lots of people are still playing it. I don't agree that it can never be fixed, because they're really working hard on it, and they haven't even ventured into the first expansion territory yet. Kind of wish they would. I kind of want to see more storyline, but that's another discussion, I think, for another time. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming by. Again, I am Kagekaze, and I will see you next time.